Time now for our Friday roundtable discussion, in which we take a closer look at some of the week's top stories. The World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. It was more somber in tone. There was a lot of frank talk and even some verbal combat. George Mitchell's Mideast mission, what's been achieved? And Afghanistan, with elections delayed and more American troops arriving. Are we at a turning point? Joining me once again, Gideon Rose, managing editor of Foreign Affairs magazine. Thanks for being with us. Good to be here. Davos, this is a gathering of the political and financial stars of the world, and a bit of lecturing, or I guess the U.S. took its lumps from both China and from Russia. Should we expect that?
I think we should. Everybody's annoyed by the crisis and distressed by it. Everybody's blaming the United States. The Europeans apparently were smug the next day and saying, well, see, this proves our system of capitalism is better than yours. And I think that, the good thing to focus on here is that while Davos is a wonderful representation of what the elite is thinking at any given moment, it proved to be a not so good predictor of the future. And so nobody expected this crisis at last year's Davos. Hopefully, maybe there'll be a comeback that nobody is expecting now.
Well, we always think of Davos as being, very suave, sophisticated. We don't expect sort of verbal fisticuffs, and yet it did break out. There was a discussion that was actually taking place between the president of Israel and the prime minister of Turkey and others. They got into a spat about Gaza, and eventually the prime minister of Turkey gets up and storms out. How serious is that?
Well, there was this procedural thing about who had what time left and who could talk and who gets cut off. But the real issue here is the passions that Gaza and the crisis there raises, even for essentially countries who are allies, such as Israel and Turkey.
Well, and that's the important thing that I wanted to talk about, is that Turkey has been very active on the part of the Israelis of trying to negotiate, trying to bring about settlements. So very much seen to be maybe not ally, but in Israel's side of things. And now you have this, the last friend Israel had in the region?
Well, there are functional reasons why Turkey and Israel have cooperated. They have a lot of interests in common. But the issue of the Palestinians and of the incursion into Gaza and so forth is raising such passions across the Muslim world that it's making it very difficult for Israel to retain even the business-like relationships it has with some other peer-to-peer governments.
Well, and this leads us to the U.S. Special Envoy, George Mitchell, who's on his listening tour, but he's also doing some talking as well. What's he achieved so far? What's he done?
Well, the late, great Warren Zevon, I think, should be the...
Not often we hear a quote from Warren, but okay.
The poet laureate of the Obama administration's foreign policy. He wrote a classic song called The Envoy about Philip Habib and his efforts. And I think that you can go back to that, because what Mitchell really should be trying to do is what Habib did back in the early 80s in Lebanon, which is oversee first a disengagement and a calming down of tensions, and then try to move on to something more substantive and serious for the long term. Right now, Mitchell's chief job, as evidenced, I think, by what happened at Davos between Erdogan and Peres, is to calm things down so the parties can even begin to talk seriously with each other. We're not going to see a resolution of the Arab-Israeli conflict anytime very soon. But it's important to get them talking civilly at all and get the immediate battles to subside first. And I think that Mitchell and the Obama administration more generally are taking just the right tack by going out there and listening. The president's appearance on Al Arabiya TV was a masterpiece of public diplomacy towards the Arab world. And hopefully there'll be some kind of progress that might lay the groundwork for real talks down the road a bit.
Do you think he'll be back in the region soon? I mean, it'll be a quick turnaround?
I think that he's going to be back in the region on a regular basis without necessarily having much turnaround.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to Afghanistan, because a number of developments there. Again, more troops going in. Hamid Karzai, more and more, does not seem to be the favorite of the Obama administration. And now word that the elections, national elections, are being postponed, and many suspect it's for political reasons.
Well, see, here too, Holbrooke can learn from Zevon. You have a classic song called "Send Lawyers, Guns, and Money to Get Me Out of Here." The United States wants to get out. It doesn't want to be trapped in a quagmire in Afghanistan. It's going to have to ramp up its commitment of money and of troops. But at the same time, it's also going to need lawyers and diplomats. And the fact is that the election crisis is not so much a real crisis because there's going to be an election, and the only question is what are the circumstances, security-wise, under which it can play out.
Do you think Karzai should be worried, though?
I think that Karzai might not win the election, but the real question is not so much who's going to win the election as what kind of local political compromises are possible and necessary that can perhaps peel off some of the less terrible Taliban supporters and make them acquiescent in a Western and friendly government.
Warren Zevon, was this the same Werewolves of London?
It was the same Werewolves. I couldn't work in Werewolves of London, but...
Maybe next week we can work on that. Gideon Rose, as always, thank you. Political expert and musician extraordinaire, apparently. Thank you.
Thank you.